Hi everyone, I'm James from Priory North London and Staple & Associates in Holborn. This is my short series of videos looking at some of the ideas behind psychotherapy. So today I wanted to look at thinking errors. And thinking errors are ways that we start to experience the world when we feel stressed or anxious, and everything just seems very extreme and very black and white. And if something was brilliant and beforehand, now it seems completely rubbish. Or if we're thinking about a person, they were a good person and we liked them before, and now we just can't bear to be around them. So we're noticing that we're getting these extreme reactions and ways of experiencing things. When we are more relaxed or feeling more robust, then we tend to think in a more complex way. Everything is a bit of one thing and a bit of another. We live in the grey, and we don't tip into these extreme ways of experiencing the world. But when thinking errors are around, then we know something is going on for us. Why do this? Why try and identify these? Well, because then we can do something about it rather than getting caught up in our reactions to how we're experiencing events. We can pause, think how we might be more realistic in terms of our understanding, and then react hopefully in a more constructive way. So today I wanted to start by thinking about catastrophizing, which is a very common one. I think one we probably all know quite well. Something relatively minor happens, but it just feels completely overwhelming, and like we're completely knocked sideways by it. So maybe the simplest thing is to think of an example, and I was going to use the example of a group of mates go out, you hear about it, and then you find you haven't been invited. So your reaction, if you're catastrophizing, might be, oh my God, they've dropped me, they don't want to know me anymore. That might chain to other thoughts. You maybe think about times this has happened before, and you think, well, no one likes me. I'm a loser. I'll never speak to them again. And as I say, this can then inform reactions because, you might sulk or you might strop off, and you're certainly unlikely to try and find a helpful way forward. So you've identified the thinking error, and here it's catastrophizing. And the next thing to do might be to think, well, what are the more realistic thoughts? So in this case, it might be things like, well, people can be a bit rubbish and a bit random when they're organising things. So the fact that you haven't been asked along this time doesn't necessarily have all these terrible consequences. Or, maybe they have reasons for wanting to see each other or discuss things that may not involve you so much. Or maybe they have not invited you this time, and there might be reasons for that, but it doesn't. Your reaction doesn't have to be off the scale. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have any reactions. I mean, we are obviously something like that. We're likely to have some feelings about it. We're social creatures, and we don't like it when we get sort of pushed away. But the problem here, when the thinking errors are around, is as I say, the scale of it, and the fact that our reaction then becomes so out of proportion with what's actually happened. Let's think about another thinking error, and one that's also around in this example would be mind reading. So mind reading, you try to work out what's been going on in the heads of the other people, and to not knowing somehow feels anxiety provoking. You want to work it out. You've got to know, even if it's quite even if some of those conclusions are quite negative. So you start stressing about it. Oh, they didn't invite me because they don't like me, or they're bored of me, got nothing to say, or I'm too much, got too much to say, or they don't like my opinions on Brexit, or they think I'm too right wing, or they think I'm, too right on. I mean, it's this, the stuff of madness. You just go round and round in circles, often get into that disputation thing. Maybe it's this, or maybe it's not. What about this? What about that? Really, you normally just end up in the sort of position you started. It hasn't actually taken you anywhere. And the third one I want to look at is black and white thinking, also called all or nothing thinking. So to use this example, you may say, oh, they were such fantastic friends, my best mates ever, and now they don't seem to want to know me anymore. It was so brilliant. Now it's smashed to pieces in a million bits, and I'll never have friendships as good as those again. And again, this sort of extreme thinking is part of how we are when we're very stressed or very young. I mean, if you think about how toddlers experience things, they generally are either putting their arms around you and being very happy, or they're booting you in the shins and telling you that they want to kill you. At least my children did quite a bit of that. And so let's think about the thing in recap. So with thinking errors, the first thing to do is identify the thought. So the thought in this case would be, I've not been invited, they don't like me. That, if you just have that thought in your head, that's you fused with that thought, it feels like reality. Well, the first thing to do, stand back from the thought and say something like, I'm having the thought that they don't like me. So having the thought indicates that maybe they don't like you, maybe your thought about it is right, but it could just be you being a bit paranoid, or you being a bit, over stressing about the situation. So it opens up a thinking space. It indicates that part of this belongs to you. Identify the thinking errors that may be around for the particular experience. Here, we're thinking there's been catastrophizing. My reaction was off the scale. There's been mind reading. I tried to imagine all the reasons that I might have been deliberately excluded. There's black and white thinking. It was such a brilliant set of mates, band of brothers, and now, there's all this kind of tension. The whole thing's going to fall apart, and it's all over. So black and white thinking. So you've identified thinking errors. You know that something's going on in your mind, which, as I say, is, that's good news, because, you can't change external reality very easily. You can negotiate with it, but what you can change is you can change how you experience reality and stop yourself from overreacting, sulking, stropping off, or whatever. So now there's been thinking errors in the situation. Let's think, what might the realistic thoughts be? Well, as I said, people are random. Maybe they forgot, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they did leave you out this time. But that doesn't have to be the end of the world or the end of the relationship. And notice the quality of the anxiety that goes with each of these ways of looking at things. So with the extreme thinking, with the thinking errors, they create a lot of anxiety. I mean, if you feel things are catastrophic, or people are thinking these bad thoughts about you, then naturally you're going to feel very sort of churned up about that, and that affects your reaction, affects your mood, it fuels more negative thinking. It's just really a vicious circle. Once you identify that and you think, well, what are the realistic thoughts? They're a bit rubbish. They don't get it right all the time. People don't. Maybe I'll give them a call, suggest something for next week. You feel yourself calming down and just, orientating yourself completely differently to the experience. And as I say, and that then affects your behaviour, but you're on a much more helpful pathway to dealing with the situation in a constructive way. So knowledge of your own thought processes drives a much better outcome, gives you a chance to react more appropriately, more helpfully, and hopefully be a more happier and chilled person. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and hope to see you at the next one.